The Council Hall of the Galactic Federation was a place of delicate diplomacy, filled with species from across the stars. Sitting at the central table were the commanding representatives of over 20 different alien races. The beings, towering and insectoid, small and tentacled, humanoid and four-armed, all looked to the figure at the head of the table, Ambassador Seltriv of the Zinther. The peacekeepers of the galaxy. The room was tense. For the past century, the Zinther had worked tirelessly to maintain peace within the Federation, ensuring no species would get the upper hand over others. But today, Seltriv's calm demeanor was cracking. He had received troubling news from a diplomatic mission to Earth. There was a human one of them who had done something unexpected. "Ambassador Seltriv," a voice broke his thoughts. He looked up, blinking his multifaceted eyes as a small alien with scales shimmered like the surface of a deep ocean spoke. "We have received reports from the human embassy. An exchange student, Elizabeth, arrived on Zinther Prime this morning." The Zinther ambassador's antennae twitched. "I know, and that's the problem," he muttered. "The human has done something we did not anticipate." In the Federation's eyes, Earth was considered a young, almost primitive planet. Humans had their ways, bold, reckless, and often dangerous, but they were still learning how to engage with the galactic community. This was why the Zinther had sent Elizabeth, an exchange student, as a gesture of peace. She would serve as a cultural ambassador of sorts, to represent humanity's innocence, its curiosity, and, to the more cynical Federation members, its inherent weakness. But this student had already proven far more than they had bargained for. It was just another day on Zinther Prime. Elizabeth had been briefed, prepped for every situation, and reminded not to cause any incidents. The instructions had been clear: be polite, smile, don't speak out of turn. And yet, as she entered the grand amphitheater where a formal event with the Zinther was being held, Elizabeth felt none of the anxiety she expected. There was something about the grandiose alien designs, the overcomplicated etiquettes, that made her feel like she had stepped into one of her university lectures back home in Australia. She was no stranger to navigating tricky social situations. After all, she had survived the many BBQs and awkward family reunions, but this was different. This was something on an intergalactic scale. The council members were sitting on their grand thrones, watching her closely. They were expecting her to speak, to offer a polite greeting, something that would signify Earth's place in the grander scheme of the Federation. They waited, anticipating her hesitance, her nerves. What they did not expect was for her to take one look at the council, then smile a cheeky grin. "GJ." "Mates," Elizabeth said, crossing her arms over her chest, as if she were back home at the pub with friends. "Thanks for having me, but I've got a bit of a bone to pick with you." The room went silent. Evan, her partner in the exchange program, shifted nervously in his seat. He had been trying to blend in, trying to follow the rules, to be a good human representative. Elizabeth, on the other hand, had made her grand entrance with the kind of audacity that could only come from an Australian upbringing. He whispered under his breath, "Elizabeth, no. This is not how it's done here." But Elizabeth ignored him. She turned toward the alien representative at the far end, a towering, insectoid figure whose pincers clicked as it shifted in its seat. "I've heard you lot go on about the Federation's great wisdom. But here's the thing," Elizabeth continued, her voice growing louder as she gestured toward the alien. "You reckon you're the big brains of the galaxy, but I've seen more impressive diplomacy in a kangaroo fight." The Zinther ambassador's antennae twitched. The others around the room began shifting nervously. It wasn't just the disrespect, it was the sheer confidence. The fact that Elizabeth, an exchange student, a human, was speaking to them like this was beyond comprehension, but Evan wasn't prepared for what came next. Elizabeth casually walked over to one of the nearest alien leaders, an elder, whose species had been at the heart of Federation decision-making for centuries. She grinned up at it. "Listen, mate," she said, tapping her fingers against the alien's thick, leathery arm. "I'm not here to be polite. I'm here because my people are done with all this talk. Humans aren't weak. We aren't some little species you can just push around because you've got fancy technology and 1,000 years of history. The alien's many eyes blinked in rapid succession, its mouth opening and closing in confusion. And don't even get me started on your politics, Elizabeth added with a knowing smirk. A bunch of blokes sitting around deciding everyone else's fate. Nah, my people, we fight for what's right. We fight for everyone, not just the ones who can bend a knee. There was a moment of stunned silence, as the weight of her words hung heavily in the air. And then, an alien next to the elder, his species known for their highly sensitive hearing, winced. "What's that smell?" he said, flaring his nostrils. "It's earthy." Elizabeth grinned even wider. "Oh, that's just the scent of a real fight. You wouldn't know anything about it." And in that moment, something shifted in the room. The other delegates, who had been expecting a meek, scared human to offer some kind of ceremonial greeting, began to feel the stirrings of something unfamiliar. The Zinther, who had long held the mantle of peacekeepers, began to question their assumptions about humanity. This was not a species that was easily intimidated. This was not a species that would bow to their rules. By the time the council meeting ended, it was clear Elizabeth had done something that no one expected. In the following days, the Federation representatives would express regret. They had underestimated Earth, they had underestimated humans. And for the first time, they realized that Earth, under the stewardship of this wild and reckless species, might just be the galaxy's greatest wild card. The Zinther ambassador turned to his council, his antennae drooping with a mix of exhaustion and admiration. "We may have underestimated them," he muttered under his breath. One of the council members, a large four-armed alien, raised his hand. "Ambassador, should we reconsider the position of Earth in the Federation?" Seltriv looked at the empty space where Elizabeth had stood moments before. He nodded solemnly. "Yes, we need to rethink everything. For the first time in 100 years, Earth is not the underdog." And that was how the Federation learned, in the most unexpected way, that sometimes the bravest warriors weren't the ones with the most advanced technology or the longest history. Sometimes they were the ones who could walk into a room full of powerful beings, grin, and say, "GJ, mates,